Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today I want to show you a really fun embossing technique called Faux Mosaics. You can see my Faux Mosaic or Faux Mosaic focal on my card. This heart shape, it has been paper pieced with lots of different scrapbooking papers, and then in the centers between each of those pieces of pattern paper is heat embossing. So if I wiggle this a little bit, you can see the shine. That's embossing powder that has been heat set and melted in between each of these pieces of pattern paper to give a really cool patchwork effect. It's a super easy technique to do and a lot of fun too. So let me show you what you need to have to get started. The first thing you'll need, of course, is a shape to put all of your paper onto. And you can freehand cut a shape. You could do a heart, you could do a star, you could do a square or circle or something. You could also use a template, and I'm using a template. This is the 25 Hearts template, and this is from Hot Off the Press. And I'm using this shape right here, and this is the largest of the curvy hearts. So I've simply traced that onto a piece of cardstock, and you do need to have a cardstock weight as your base. It just makes the whole piece a little bit stronger. So I've traced around and cut this out. The next thing I need to have, of course, is paper to do my piecing with. And I'm using, also from Hot Off the Press, their red velvet paper pack. You do want to have coordinating papers. It just makes it a lot easier to choose to mix and match. And I've chosen 3 from that set, the dot and a faux texture, and then this pattern design. I really find when choosing my 3 papers for this that it helps to go with like an all-over design, like a floral, and then something, another all-over pattern that's a nice contrast, like a floral and a geometric go really well together. And then something that will go as kind of an in-between, so something like a faux texture like this green. The kinds of patterns that don't really work are stripes and plaids, because it really kind of conflicts with visually with the lines that you're going to be embossing with. So just a tip there. You're also going to need something very important, which is very, very, very sticky double-sided tape. And this tape I picked up at the hardware store, and it's carpet tape. So super, super sticky and double-sided. That's going to be really important. I like to use something that's a little bit wider as well, as opposed to really thin tape, because thin tape will take a lot longer to cover this. And then, of course, the last thing you need is some embossing powder. And I'm using a fine embossing powder, and this is in black. So the next step is to cover your shape with your tape. So I'm going to start up here at the top and just simply cut off strips of this tape. I'm working onto my craft sheet, and this is going to make it a little bit easier to kind of hold this down while I put my tape on. So I want to do wide strips that go across. Don't try and economize on your tape for this and try and like piece little pieces together, because that's going to make it a little bit harder to do. So nice big wide pieces going across here. You want the pieces to go right up next to each other snugly. Smooth that down and keep going until the whole thing, even that little tip, is covered. And then press everything down. Now I'm going to take this up off of my craft sheet to really burnish it down without getting it completely stuck to my work surface. I'm going to turn this over and then really burnish this down with my fingers to make sure that that tape is on there really, really well. You may also want to use at this point a bone folder or something like this to get around the sides here. Just make sure that you're not, sticking this to other things or to yourself. And then once you have this all on here, you just need to go ahead and trim around the outside edge with scissors. Now I've already got one piece that has already been trimmed, since that's not the most exciting thing to watch. And then I just need to start peeling off the liner and peeling off these strips one by one. This is going to reveal that super sticky part of the tape. Get this up here, and then the finishing piece. So my super sticky heart, I'm going to try and set this down, get off my fingers. And now what I'm going to do is add my pattern paper. Now, as I mentioned, I've got these 3 pieces here. I need to cut a couple of triangular pieces from each one of the papers. I would suggest that you don't cut really tiny triangles because that's going to take a lot longer and a lot more effort to fill this entire shape. So what I generally do is just cut off the corners and start there. So I've got a series of these triangles that I'm going to work with and start placing them down onto my heart. And I like to start in the center with a big piece and just kind of plop that down and then add additional pieces. As I'm doing this, as I'm putting these down, I'm leaving some space in between and just sort of alternating my strips. Kind of try not to leave, like I wouldn't necessarily want to do it this and then leave this little excess bit to be embossed. That doesn't tend to work quite as well. So you do want to try and get the edges as much as you possibly can. So let me get this over here, pop that down, and let's see, let's get something up here as well. You can also trim these down and get smaller pieces to work with as you want. Do this, and let's put another one down here. And then maybe put this in here. Once you stick it down, it's pretty much down, so you might want to keep that in mind as well. Now I've got a lot of pieces that are hanging off the edge, and I've got some empty space here. I'm going to flip this over and just kind of chop off some of these. See if I can use these to fill this little space. Let's see if I can do that. This here. And then maybe I'll just pop in another one like so. Okay, now I have my heart covered with all of these different pieces. I've got little bits of the exposed tape still showing on here. And then what I like to do is just trim off, even just loosely trim off any of the excess so you kind of know the shape that you're working with. So just going around here with a pair of scissors and getting off any of the excess paper pieces. And this will give you a better sense of what your shape is going to look like once you have it all ready to go. So trim this around here. I'm going to need to use some glue gun or something on my scissors when I'm done with this technique every time. It gets a little bit sticky, but that's okay. It's the tape. Okay, get this off, scoot these aside, come in around here, and one last bit there. Okay, there we go. Now I need to add my embossing powder on here. So I'm going to bring in a piece of white scrap paper that's been folded in half, and I'm just going to place this down in the center and get my embossing powder. And I'm going to do this the same way I would do to heat emboss anything. The nice thing is you don't have to hurry because it's not like this is going to dry or anything. You don't need to work while it's still wet like you do with an embossing ink. So that's kind of nice. And then I'm just going to sprinkle this on and fill all of the areas that have the tape exposed. Okay? Don't worry about being too stingy with it, because you can always use the excess. Then what I'm going to do, I need to sort of press all of the embossing powder into the tape. And I don't want to do that with my hands because then you end up, you know how it goes, you end up with the tape or with the embossing powder stuck to your hands and it's all over everywhere. So I'm just going to fold this over and smooth it down with my hands. Press as much as I can. Really make sure that I'm going over the entire design. If I want to, I can also bring in a brayer and really smoosh the embossing powder into that tape. Okay, and then open this up, and then I need to tap off the excess embossing powder. And you're going to end up probably like me with lots of little patchy bits on here. So what I like to do then is take a dry paintbrush and just sort of knock off any of the excess bits. And this really tends to help to get rid of any of those stray pieces before you heat set it. So you're going to go and kind of clean up, do some cleanup duty on the pattern paper. If you ever need to, like if you take off maybe a bit more of this than you want to, you can always go back and reapply. So you're going to scoot off all of that excess embossing powder. And then of course you can use this as a funnel to get the rest of your embossing powder back into your jar. And then all you need to do is heat set this with your embossing tool the same way you would do with any embossed piece. I would show it to you, except I have a certain limit of things that I can have plugged in at one time before I blow a fuse in my house. So you'll have to trust me on this one, that you can go ahead and heat emboss that, and then you will end up with that really pretty raised effect. So let me bring this back in and you'll see what that will look like. So you can see the shine of my heat embossed area on here, and how all of those little pieces just really stand out so nicely that way. Now I've used more paper from that same paper pack, some little strips here. I've also embellished it with some gold dazzles, and these are really fun. These are gold metallic jewel borders, and you can see where the borders are that I've already used. It's that white space in there. But you just peel them off and stick them onto the paper, and it adds a really nice shiny touch. And to coordinate with that, I used a little gold brad here on my circle punched stamped piece. And I did this with a 7/8 of an inch circle, and then I matted it onto a 1-inch circle of black cardstock. This little "With Love" is just a little greeting from hot off the press as well. And I put this up on foam tape and then adhered it onto the heart. Now the heart is also up on foam tape, so there's a little bit of extra dimension on there as well. So this is how to do faux mosaics. I hope you enjoyed this segment today. For more ideas and inspiration, please do stop by my website at saranaumann.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.